wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to another Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and look, it's another week. It's another 90th minute loss for your Reds away in Chicago. But there's more news than just losses. Transfer window is open, and the deals are starting to trickle in, and the rumors are starting to trickle in. And in this week's show, we're definitely going to be talking about those transfer rumors and opening up the Michael Singh notebook. Messi cometh. He is now here in Major League Soccer, and Jeff has some things to say about it. I talk a little bit about away travel and what that's like for TFC fans, especially when the team is not great. And of course, we get to your comments in this week's burning question presented by Next Door. Before we jump into the show, this is a last reminder. We have moved to a new YouTube channel. Obviously, if you're watching us live, you've already found it, but tell your friends. Tell anybody else. You come and find us at youtube.com/@TTID podcast. Hit the bell for the notification so you don't miss any of the live broadcasts of the show. Lots to dig into this week with my co-hosts Michael Singh and Jeffrey P. Nesker. Gents, how are you doing? We'll get into a little food corner because obviously I did go to Chicago.
We better.
Like you were dropping the recommendations to which I did none of them. I apologize.
You did none of them.
I did absolutely none of them. It was not a culinary weekend, my friend. Let me tell you, away trips, I will get to it later, not a culinary weekend. But yeah, gentlemen, before I get into that, gentlemen, how were your weekends?
Jeff, go. Mine's a blur.
Wedding season. I had open bar. I was up in Whitby. Congratulations, Brett and Ali. And my Sunday was recovering from that. And it was quite a recovering. I don't know if I'm human yet. Got a lot of flack for my op-ed piece where I said, I'm not ever watching that game. The highlights are enough. And they're like, well, why talk about the game yet? I didn't really talk about the game. I mean, let's be honest. I haven't really talked about the game beyond what I'd like to see changing in like the last 4 columns. So I think I'm uniquely qualified to discuss the game, even though I've never seen it.
Oh, you've seen it. Oh, we've
yeah,
seen
exactly.
That
I've seen it.
Yeah, that
I've
game.
seen
We've all seen that.
year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my Saturday night, covering some Toronto FC and some other teams for MLS. I went to the Jays game on Saturday. Shout out the Jays, by the way. Jays are on fire.
Sweep the D-backs, baby.
Yeah, man. Jays are on fire. Big series with the Padres coming up, too. I mean, if you want a team in Toronto that's contending right now and in a playoff spot, the Jays are your team right now. They're stealing the summer. TFC had a chance, but...
This message brought to you by Mike Newell's job.
Yeah. The weekend was good. Obviously, went to Chicago. I spent my Saturday night being thoroughly depressed, but still met some great people. Shout out to the away traveling support from Block 114, from Kings, from U Sector, from Red Patch that made it down. Obviously, great to connect with those people and some great people in Chicago as well that support the Fire that were actually quite kind to us. So that was fun. Did also get to Wrigley Field to watch the Cubs. First time I've been around Wrigley Field before, but I've never actually been in. So Friday night, I got to see the Cubs, hoping that they were going to do us a favor against the Red Sox. Did not. Got absolutely demolished.
What's the Wrigley Field of MLS?
Ooh,
RFK was, I think.
Now, I guess that or like historic Crew Stadium. I guess now maybe. the Wrigley Field of MLS, like right now, I guess
is it BMO?
Like,
has it gone that far? Is it BMO now? Yeah.
Nah, I would actually probably say it's Providence Park. Like in terms of its the sort of look of it, because it was an old baseball stadium, right? It used to have a AAA team.
Yeah, there. I would say you're reaching,
Providence
but I've
Park
been there and I've been
Portland?
to both, and I can tell you it does have a bit of Wrigley vibes, a little bit, but there's a lot of new there now, so it's kind of got its own weird Frankenstein vibes, right? Like
I mean,
Wrigley,
the oldest stadium, right?
Yeah,
the oldest stadium in the league right now most likely would be.
Soldier Field.
Ooh, a lot of them are all new. Probably between maybe Toyota Park in Dallas and maybe Dick's Sporting Goods in
Dick's Sporting
Colorado.
Goods, yeah.
Or Rio Tinto now. Like
is Subaru old?
Sorry,
Subaru in Philly, is that old or new?
2010.
Yeah,
they're not that old. Yeah, no, I mean, like right now, MLS doesn't really have one because a lot of those stadiums have changed. I mean, you could say it's Yankee Stadium for NYCFC, but even that's still relatively new because it's new Yankee Stadium. But anyway, yeah, it was a great time. Did not do deep dish.
And yet you claim to hate, you voraciously talked about how much you hated it.
Because I've done it in the past.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like, all right.
No, I've done it in the past. It's terrible. No, just a lot of wings, a lot of like Chicago staples, hot dogs, stuff like that. Like again, an away weekend is not a culinary experience. You're not there to sample the finest of food goods of a city. Aside, I will say, after the game, though, we went to a bar afterwards down in the Loop. I walked back to my hotel room and got slightly lost on the way, but it was great because I ran into like a little block sort of mini party that had a really great taco truck. I got some really great al pastor tacos, proper authentic Mexican tacos. Because like if you know Chicago well, it is basically a Mexican city, which is awesome. So yeah, no, that was my food sort of corner. I just got some really, really great tacos.
And none of my
thoroughly depressed.
Yep.
I
finally
you were like sending
Alicia.
Me to like. You were sending me to like some really nice, like, don't get me wrong. Next time I go, if it's going to be like a sort of a social visit, sure. But like, if you're just there to drink beers and essentially, go watch sports, that's not the vibe, man. That wasn't the vibe.
I don't believe you.
I don't believe you either. I think you had deep dish pizza. You just don't want to talk about it.
No, but, I did not.
Speaking of pizza, Alicia does not like pizza, so she let me order pizza for myself yesterday. And when you order pizza for one, I ended up with like a large pizza and chicken wings from Domino's, and I felt like the worst gluttonous person all day long. And then she rubbed it in my face because when it was time for her to order dinner, she's like, maybe I'll order those bulgogi tacos that we like so much. And I'm like, but wait, I got this pizza. So she basically ensured that I'm not going to fight about ordering pizza for the next 6 months.
She suckered you in. She suckered you in.
Yeah, she absolutely suckered me 100%.
All right, Jeffy, you've got some takes here on, before we get into TFC, obviously, look, I don't think we can ignore the fact that Lionel Messi is now in MLS. I mean, he was already, but now it's like official. He plays this weekend, or this week. I think they have a friendly in a couple of days. So that will be his first official turnout for Inter Miami. You got some thoughts on the whole spectacle that was yesterday in his unveiling at Drive Pink Stadium. So I'm turning the mic over to you.
It's funny because I said we should talk about it, and then you just like gave me clearance to rant, and I'm more than willing to do it.
Go for it, because I don't have that many thoughts.
Here's a question, my boys. How many people do you think tuned into that whatever the hell that was last night?
I know the number, or at least the reported number.
The number that's been bandied around. I don't think it's official, but according to Apple TV, how many people do you think tuned into it?
3.5. Was it billion?
It was billion. It was billion. The quoted attendance for that was 3.5 billion people, which is just around half of the global population. Yeah, I call BS on that. But regardless, I mean, if this was the culmination of what Apple TV wanted, and some people would claim that it is, that show last night was an absolute disaster. I mean, I'm not even talking about the rain. You can account for rain. Why there was no accounting for rain is kind of ridiculous. I mean, there are such things as tarps that you can set up. There are tents. I know they wanted to get their wonderful little spider cam droney shots, but you can do that and still have a dry area for stuff to take place in. I mean, I can't remember who it was, but the rain falling on that mic was cutting out the audio, but that really didn't matter because there was a hot mic pervasively through the whole damn show. You could hear the producers talking amongst themselves, and I was sitting there waiting like a soap opera for somebody to drop F-bombs or for somebody to say something they can't take back, because quite honestly, they deserve it. If they're not like friend of the show, Martin Bailey, you know, we know a lot of people who work in that regard. Like, did they have Siri running the desk? Because how the hell is a hot mic not turned off in 2 seconds? If any, like, this was supposed to be their coming out party in a certain regard. And trust me, they're doing it again this morning. I think they did with a training session. This is their opportunity to, you know, showcase their product throughout the world. And it was so Mickey Mouse. It was unbelievable. Like, it was more Mickey Mouse than the 360 show. And the constant amount of hand waving and smoke blowing, like, guys, you know, I think Garber in his interview was like, credit to you guys. You know, I remember on a Thursday we were talking with Apple, and on a Friday we were planning our shows. I don't really want to know how the sausage is made. I don't think that that's a very good flex. Like, it was bad. It was really, really bad.
You know what's funny about that, Jeff? It literally doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You could roll out Messi, and I don't care which way that you roll him out.
3.5 billion people are going to watch it. Yeah,
it'll be a win for Major League Soccer. But yeah, it was obviously, you know, with the pouring rain, I'm sure it made things a lot more difficult than they had planned. And yeah, this really was Apple TV's first live kind of spectacle. Obviously, they do live match coverage, they do the 360 show, they do the post-game show, and you know that is getting better and better. But this was their first actual like live on set with, you know, an experience they haven't really done so far. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think we all got some insight into just some of the challenges behind the scenes. But I think overall, like, my takeaways was that it was really cool to see kind of what Miami is sort of starting to become. And we know that Miami has been, they themselves have promised to be this next level kind of team, this team that sets the bar in Major League Soccer, and this team that does.
I hope they don't set the bar in AV text, because that bar is pretty damn low.
Well, yeah, but they reach for the stars, I guess, when it comes to, you know, some of their signings. You know, they tried to go big before, but we've never seen a team go big on this level. And obviously Messi is going to be great here. Obviously Sergio Busquets is going to be joining him. Reportedly Jordi Alba will be on his way too to Miami. They're also going to be utilizing, you know, you're hearing a lot of U22 players coming in too, just to add and complement the guys that they're bringing in there. So me personally, I'm excited. I guess I would love to hear your takes on whether or not you think this will be a success or if you think it'll flop. What are your early predictions before he gets started here? Because Messi's going to be making his debut apparently later this week against Cruz Azul in the Leagues Cup. What do we think here? Is Miami going to actually be able to do this?
Okay, so that's like two different questions to me, right? Because one is how are they going to be on the pitch, and the other the question is how is it going to be for the league business wise?
Yeah.
So on the business wise, they're going to be fine, right? It's
already done. They've already
done. The business wise is great. Like it's going to do what the league wants it to do from a business perspective. So let's put that aside.
And then if I could quickly just interject there, just Don Garber apparently was saying, I think in an article in The Athletic, that there's now going to be more clarity with the salary cap, and that they're trying to make it easier for casual fans to, you know, get into Major League Soccer and maybe play a little bit of armchair GM in essence, and a lot of transparency, which is something that we've been kind of pushing for and we've been asking for a long time. A lot of people have. So for him to actually come out and acknowledge that, maybe a step in the right direction business wise.
I can't wait for, you know, the time I'm going to be, you know, in sort of October, November time, watching La Liga or watching Serie A or watching the Eredivisie, and they talk about Messi scoring a great goal from Inter Miami, and the announcer starts talking about TAM. It's going to be great. No, like, look, I don't know how this is going to work football wise. I mean, look, Messi's going to be fine, right? Like, as a football, he's going to be fine. How the team does, I don't know, because let's be honest, we haven't seen a signing of this magnitude in the league before, so we don't really know how this all will work from a budget perspective. How do you strengthen the team around him? Like, Busquets is fine. I think he'll be fine in MLS, though I think he might, you know, like in terms of playing passes and things like that, of course, he's going to be fantastic. I mean, again, we've talked about this with Lorenzo Insigne and the DPs at Toronto FC. Skill-wise, not at the same level, but pace and physicality right up there. So how does he handle that? Same question with Jordi Alba. And then building the team around those guys. Do they run into the same challenges that TFC have done? Do they mismanage their cap? Like, they've got some pretty expensive players on the roster right now that they're going to have to figure out what to do with. Like, they still need to figure out what to do with Rodolfo Pizarro.
Oh, they bought him out.
Oh, that's official now.
Yeah, he's done. He's done.
All right. So then they've got, but they still have other players. Like, what do you do with Leo Campagna? Like, do you keep him? What do you do with some of these other players that you've got that can eat into your cap? And it's a lot of the same questions TFC have tried to answer, and TFC have not done successfully. So I'm interested to see how Inter Miami deals with that, and also I'm interested to see how Messi takes to his teammates, because arguably this will be the worst crop of players he's probably ever played with in his life, right? And I'm not saying that as a diss to MLS players. It's just a fact, right? Like, he has never, maybe he was like 11, but other than that, like, he has never played with players that are just not going to be able to do a lot of the things and read the game the way that he can. Not many players in the world can, obviously, but from a proficiency perspective, he's usually used to guys who can sort of figure this stuff out. He's not going to have a ton of that. Bryce Duke, all due respect, like, that's not exactly Luis Suarez. So, I'm interested to see how that works. I don't really know how this will go. Again, it's kind of like how TFC was when they signed Insigne. Either this is going to be a great success and they win cups and they become that team that we think they might become, or this ends up in an unmitigated disaster and he probably just retires. And
correct me if I'm wrong. Has a big signing ever worked out in major? Has that translated ever to team success? When I say big signing, I mean the David Beckhams, the Thierry Henrys, the Wayne Rooneys, the Bastian Schweinsteigers, the Shakiris, the Insignes, the
moral victories,
the Frank Lampards, Andrea Pirlo, like CVG. Has that ever translated into team success? That being said, let me make this clear. Messi's a different caliber,
a different animal.
Of course,
you saw what he did just 6 months ago at the World Cup. He was the best player in the world. Like, none of those players could come over and say they were anywhere close to that at the time that they came over. So, yeah, you're right. TFC could be a blueprint in a way for Miami in terms of, God dang it, surround Lionel Messi with runners. Surround Lionel Messi with guys who are going to work their butts off and get him behind and poach goals. We see Joseph Martinez starting to round back into form for that Miami side. Could he potentially feast off, some of the service that Jordi Alba down the left and Lionel Messi either through the middle or down the right? Like, yeah, can we see it? I don't know. So I guess we'll see how it translates. I think people in the chat are saying David Beckham had some success here.
Well, I would say that David Beckham had that success after
with
they got
Landon
Robbie
Donovan
Keane.
and Robbie Keane. Yeah, Robbie Keane's the one that I would say is the big money signing that really, really, really made results. And 10 years from now, people could say, "Hey, Christian Bale won LAFC and MLS Cup," and they're right. And that far removed from the season where Bale played 3 minutes?
Christian Bale?
Sorry, Gareth Bale. Sorry. Gareth Bale
came in.
But yeah, he is Batman. But you know what I mean? 10 years removed, people will say, well, he won. Obviously Gareth Bale was a good signing. They got him on TAM and they won MLS Cup, which ignores how little minutes he saw before getting subbed on for that freaky deaky goal, etc. Let me set the table for you guys, because Inter Miami need to be on better pace than FC Cincinnati over the rest of their games to even make the playoffs. They need to be on 2 points a game at least, right? So it's stacked against them. Here's the other one. I think TFC fans are probably the worst fan community in all of MLS to ask their takes on this big ticket signing, because we're so bitter and we're so frustrated, and our big ticket signing didn't work out. So naturally, we're gonna bring the heat. I
love this. Sorry, but I just love this point quickly. I cannot pronounce your name. I'm not even gonna try. I sincerely apologize. He says, he or she, they say, I think players will want to play for Messi versus some of these other DPs because they idolize him. I think that's such a great point too. Like, Inter Miami is automatically turned into the destination now, I think, in Major League Soccer. I think everyone now would be lining up to go to Miami if they weren't already, because Miami obviously has the weather, they have the good culture down there. In general, there's
zero state tax.
Exactly. In general, they're just a popular destination for a lot of athletes. But now you add Lionel Messi, Busquets, and Alba into the mix. I think there's going to be guys that are going to be willing to take less money to go play alongside Lionel Messi, which I think is such a good boost. And I think something TFC were actually hoping for when they signed Insigne and Bernardeschi, that they would become kind of that team in MLS. But obviously they weren't able to capitalize on that. But yeah, sorry, Jeff, keep going.
No worries. I mean, I agree with you, but I also think, what if they're assholes, right? Like, what if those three guys form a little clique in Inter Miami and no one can get in? That hero, never meet your heroes, guys. Like, that hero worship goes both ways. And if suddenly it's revealed that, these guys don't let you in and they don't want to play with you. Look, I'm going to put it this way. I read how many tweets from Americans today that were really impressed that Sergio Busquets knew how to speak English, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever read, because, English is lingua franca. There's a lot of expectations meeting reality that are going to be happening right now. And Messi is going to be the linchpin and the lightning rod for all of it. We're going to find out how well technique measures against a 21-year-old center back that just played for UCLA that has absolutely no qualms about going for your ankles. Do you know what I mean? We are going to find out when the immovable force meets the whatever, when whatever the allegory is. We're going to find out, and Messi is going to be the linchpin for all of those realizations.
Do you think
some
it's
of them
work?
Terrible? No, I don't. I think he's going to be incredible, but I don't think it's going to work. And there's takes that are saying, people aren't going to care about Inter Miami's performance. They're just going to go see Messi.
Oh, they'll care.
I don't necessarily buy that either, because, people that are out to belittle Messi that is low hanging fruit. So if he's on a team that's underperforming and isn't making the playoffs, it's going to be bandied about by every tabloid ever, by every agent looking to increase the viability. Like I said, it's all going to come, every little facet of how footballing works that we're unprepared for. My dad was talking to me because, Messi was spotted in a Publix that's near their condo in Miami, and the Messi family went to an Italian restaurant that my parents go to all the time, and it brought about something. Do you think Messi was prepared for the level of media attention he's going to get? Did you think he saw this as a chance to escape the scrutiny that he's under in Europe, and he wasn't prepared for maybe the fact that the United States would jump right in and follow, because he's getting police escorts now because people are running in front of his car in the middle of traffic to try and get a selfie. Do you know what I mean? I think this calculation was a little bit undercooked on all sides, and we're going to see just how.
I think the media coverage is less still than what
absolutely
accustomed to.
But I think it's way more than he expected.
No, I think he's been in Miami for a while. Like, he's had the house there for a while. He's been followed before when he's gone to dinner in Miami, when he's gone to the grocery store in Miami. Like, this is not necessarily new for him there. I think that's why he chose Miami. I think that's the only team he would have come to in MLS, because he has that familiarity and his wife loves it and they already have a house there. So from that perspective, I don't think that surprised him. I think the thing that will surprise him is when you pull back the curtain on MLS and sort of what MLS is. I think that might surprise him a little bit. And how he reacts to that, I'll be interested to see. I don't know how he'll react to it. Maybe he'll be fine, and he'll be, as most people describe him, as an amazing teammate who will come in and raise everybody's game
and play 1/5 of the time, because now we're hearing that, oops, we forgot that he's not going to play on turf. So maybe the stadiums that don't have grass. Hey, how do you feel about investing a couple tens of millions of dollars?
That's another topic for
But that's another thing that's coming out publicly that suggests this whole thing was built on like two people just going, let's do it, and then doing it. And now we're going to find out all the details that they missed, which I think is another reason why TFC fandom is so triggered by this, because once again, it feels like this Insigne move, like transfer market. Yep. Italian national team. Yep. We got Italians here. Let's go. And no other work was done on the contrary. Again, Messi is a level above. He's levels above. But I do think there's a lot that we're going to find out that wasn't really considered when this deal was put pen to paper.
I think Messi and Miami is going to be fun. I think they're going to be. I think they might. Let's see if they can actually play.
Disaster, maybe.
No, if they can actually play, I think they can make a late push up the Eastern Conference table. I do think that.
You really think this team can go 2 points a game?
Yeah, if Messi, Busquets, and Alba are all on the pitch, yeah, and they get their U22 signings in as well, yeah, absolutely, I do. I do.
Okay. I find it hard. Maybe I definitely think they'll pick up wins for sure. I just don't know if it'll be enough, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's shift. We talked a little bit about transfer windows and U22 initiative signings. Let's talk about Toronto, a team that went out and swung big and has struck out. Let's just be real about this. They struck out. The bat went flying into the stands, and it's a bad look. We're going to open the Michael Singh notebook here, talk a little bit about the transfer window, about the ins and the potential outs and the potential ins at Toronto FC. And let's start with the outs. Obviously, there has been some speculation for the last couple of weeks about what will happen with the two Italian DPs, Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne. Now the rumor mill seems to be heating up. The smoke is turning into a small little blaze. We'll see. But there are now rumors out there that both might be heading out the door this transfer window. Let's maybe start with Federico Bernardeschi, because I think that seems to be the more reported move, and that's starting to get a lot more traction, especially with a potential move to Serie A. But Mike, wanted to just sort of start with you in terms of what you might be hearing, and then obviously, look, there's a lot of different sort of sources on this. How we sort of sorting out what is real and what is kind of the regular transfer faff.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously the reports are out there that Federico Bernardeschi is interested in a move away from Toronto FC, and I've spoken to a couple of parties that are close to Bernardeschi and Bernardeschi's camp, I guess let's call it. And they believe that Federico Bernardeschi would want a move away from Toronto FC. So that part of the reporting is accurate. Now, obviously, the big caveat to that is what really happens to his salary and what teams are actually willing to absorb. It's reported that he's making about $6 million, I think, this year, according to MLSPA, but that's before taxes and everything like that. So you're looking at something about $3.4 to $4 million in salary that teams would have to be willing to absorb. Now, I've been told that Bernardeschi is actually willing to take a pay cut in order to facilitate a move. So Bernardeschi, I guess, from his perspective, he feels that he's been promised a lot of different things from Toronto FC, and they haven't lived up to their end of the bargain. Now we're a year into the contract, a year since he made his move over as a free agent from Juventus and signed with Toronto. And I think he feels that he should be treated in a way that's similar to Lorenzo Insigne. And from a marketing standpoint, at least, that hasn't been the case from Toronto FC's side. Also from obviously a salary standpoint as well. And then he also feels that, team-wise, the environment there in Toronto just isn't what he expected whatsoever. I think he was sold on a bigger project here in Toronto, and they just haven't lived up to their end of the bargain. So I think both parties here, Toronto and Bernardeschi, would be happy to sort of find a solution. Obviously, we hear the reports that Bologna are the team that's most interested in the services. I'm told there's other teams as well in Serie A that are kicking the tires on Bernardeschi. We'll see exactly how this plays out. But like I said, I think both parties would like a move potentially by the end of this transfer window.
I find that interesting. Obviously, look, I think we talked about this before, this idea that both players were sold on the idea of a bigger project that just hasn't come to fruition, whether that be real or not, whether that be completely in everybody's control in terms of those in the decision-making process, and then things happen at board level. But Look, I think there is also an argument here that yes, that is true, and you can't necessarily blame a player for saying, "Hey, you sold me something, and I'm not getting the return on that." But also, on the vice versa side, you could be saying maybe you didn't exactly perform to the level at which your contract sort of outlays. And I just in the end, I think this feels like a very messy divorce for both players, right? Like I think it's needed at this point. And obviously I'll get into sort of what happened in Chicago, but it just feels like this has to happen now. I think everybody needs to move on because it just doesn't feel like this is a kind of healthy relationship between players, agents, camps, and the club itself. Jeff,
Messy
obviously
divorce,
we know your
it.
opinion on it, but yeah, like I just sort of get your thoughts.
Horseshit. It's absolute horseshit. I mean, who doesn't approach a deal with rose-colored glasses on? Who goes into a deal and says this might not work out? To hold somebody accountable because it didn't is such weak sauce, man. If you have no accountability for yourself, it's always somebody else's fault. I'm so sick of this guy, man. Get the hell out of my club, honestly. Like,
but Jeff, I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. Like, I do believe that they were sold a project that just
of course they were. Of course they were.
So I don't think it's unreasonable.
But you have to have some accountability. We are paying you $6 million a year to be part of this project. So to then turn around and say, I didn't get what I was promised to me. If you were producing, that's fine. But you're not producing. So nobody cares. Nobody cares that you're upset because we didn't get what we paid for. How about having some accountability for that? It can't all just be you're disappointed because I don't give a crap that you're disappointed. You disappointed me.
Jeff,
How about
the team is
that?
also obviously disappointed as well if they want to help facilitate this move, right? So, I mean...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
it's enough already. I'm sick of hearing it, so get him out.
For sure. But I think, and I'll get to this when we talk about Mark-Anthony Kaye, but like, we do forget that footballers are humans, right? Like we forget that, if you went to you sign a contract wherever you decide to work, they promise you a whole bunch of stuff and then you don't get it, or it doesn't turn out the way, you'll be a little bit upset. Now, of course, yes, you are right, Jeff, right? Like accountability, let's be real. Federico Bernardeschi has been terrible over the last, let's call it 3 months. He's been terrible.
I mean, forget about Bernardeschi because people are saying this is all hearsay, et cetera, et cetera. Have we not heard Berna complain repeatedly about this bill of goods and, this isn't good, the tactics aren't good, this isn't good, the tactics aren't good? I'm not pulling it out of the ether. I want personal accountability. If this was your friend, forget about Berna. If this was your friend and they were saying, they were using this constant victim narrative, eventually you're going to call BS. You're going to say, where is your accountability? It takes two to tango. It can't just be about how you've been progressively besmirched over and over and over again. That gets so old so fast. He's going to sell his side of it, though.
Like, I mean, look, again, and people in the comments are right. Like, this is a rumor. It's not done deal, obviously, but there's enough smoke there. Like, there's definitely enough smoke.
There's a lot of smoke.
There's a lot of smoke, right? Like, it's to the point where it's like, if he's willing to eat, the rumor is he's willing to take as little as €1.5 million, and TFC may have to supplement part of the contract, and they're willing to do it.
I doubt that's going to happen. But
sure, but that has been reported. Then you could just tell this relationship is not on either side very healthy right now. So that's Federico Bernardeschi right now. Do
you think he's played his last game for TFC? Do you think we'll ever see him suit up again? I do as well.
I don't think we see him again. Look, maybe he does sit on the bench for a game. Maybe he plays one more game. It doesn't feel like. Now, of course, he's been suspended the last 2 games, so that is out of his hands, obviously. Though I do think the card he took was quite intentional, but that's out of his hands. We'll see. The Leagues Cup's coming up. Is there a lot of motivation for him to play NYCFC on a Wednesday in New York and in a cup tournament that he probably doesn't care about? That's the vibe I get. But we'll obviously see. There are now also rumblings about Lorenzo Insigne potentially heading out the door. These are less, I would say, substantiated, but they are out there. Mike, I don't know what specifically you've heard. I've heard some things in terms of, the Kingdom of Sod coming in potentially, but wanted to get your thought.
Yeah, I think Lorenzo Insigne is a bit tougher. I think his contract and the agreements that he has, not only with Toronto FC, but also other sponsors and other parts of his contract here in Toronto, means he has deeper ties to Toronto. He's obviously on a much more significant number than Bernardeschi is. And in order for him to actually facilitate a move, he would have to take probably a giant pay cut, unless, as you point out, Mike, a Saudi comes in and they just offer him, another lucrative contract. Maybe that's something that he thinks seriously about, but I would call those way less advanced than anything that Federico Bernardeschi is kind of dealing with. What's up, Jeff?
Well, can you speak on why he switched agents then? Because that's a huge red flag, right? If
Yeah, without getting into too much, what I will say is that the agency that he signed with is a really well-known agency in MLS. Also a really well-known agency worldwide. Now, he didn't sign with the North American office. He actually signed with an office in Netherlands, which again isn't really uncommon for the agency. So I think a lot of it might just be this agency is more familiar with this market in terms of getting the best out of maybe some sponsorships and whatnot, but also maybe there is some smoke there as well. But I like I said, I wouldn't say anything is nearly advanced. But one thing I will add about Lorenzo Insigne and kind of his situation here at Toronto, I mean, I think it's kind of mysterious that he's missed now the last 3 matches, despite being pretty consistent in training, is our understanding. And speaking to Terry Dunfield before the match, we spoke to him on Thursday, and he was pretty confident about Insigne suiting up, and all of a sudden he's not there in the squad whatsoever. So I think there are some rumblings around the club once again that in a way question his
injury,
his commitment, let's call it.
I've heard the
and his desire to actually be on the field. When he is on the field lately, at least, I think it's worth mentioning that it does seem like he wants to be there, and he is, like I said, when he's on the field, it looks like he's giving his all. But when he's missed now 10 games, 12 games maybe this season, and TFC can't afford to be missing a player like that. So it's just really important that they do get him back if that's the route that they're heading. Yeah.
When do they start getting fined? And can the team levy those for not showing up?
Well, I mean,
I don't think it's like that.
I don't think it's like that. Okay. Like if he can legitimately show he's injured, then how are you finding him?
No, I understand, but if it accelerates to a point where it starts to get a lot less legitimate, does TFC levy those fines? Does Disco levy those fines? Does MLS levy those fines?
It's not going to get there. I don't even think it's worth talking about.
Okay, excellent. I was just curious.
Yeah, I think, look, I like you said, Mike, I think it's harder to move Lorenzo Insigne. And again, unless, like I said, the Saudi Pro League or our club in Saudi essentially match the salary or get somewhere close. The also other part of that is, again, lifestyle, right? Like, is that the lifestyle he'll want? Is his family going to be okay with that? Right. That was the big thing around Victor Vasquez when he left. And that's sort of the small little things that we don't talk about in terms of sort of that human aspect of things. It is concerning though, right? Like that this is now game 3 in a row where, he did pull up with, I think, something in the calf, I believe. But again, I think we're all 3 of us hearing the same thing. Like if he wanted to play, he could play. And he isn't. So, that, look, I don't want to insinuate. I'm just saying,
don't look good.
It doesn't look good when you're the big guy, when you're the guy that this is built around, and you're not playing. It doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. Taylor Twellman, funny enough, had some interesting comments over the week in terms of TFC probably being the biggest story in the league in terms of just how negative things have become at the club and sort of the downfall of it. In a lot of ways, and a lot of people around the league looking at TFC and sort of a little bit bewildered about how it's all fallen apart, but at the same time, clap their hands with glee a little bit, and that's it's an interesting place this club is in right now, in terms of what they do next.
And that's why I was asking about discipline, because it seems like, if there are moving parts going on in the organization, right, and they're keeping mum on the fact that basically Lorenzo is revolting, right? People like,
we don't know if he's revolting yet.
We don't. But it's starting to manifest in rumors, right? People aren't saying it expressly, but it is now starting to be bandied around in not so unsettled terms. I've also been told expressly, but I'm talking about on Main, right? On Main, so eventually, TFC is the laughingstock right now. Let's not mince words, right? Like, how much more punchline do they want to be? At a certain point, that's fine. The team doesn't want to own up to inside baseball kind of stuff going on, but they have to take some kind of a public stance here, other than just sitting on their hands.
I don't think
it's not doing their reputation any good either, right?
I don't think they can, though, Jeff, right? Because any value you have out of him in terms of, okay, if you do have to move on from him, you go out public with that kind of stuff, it hurts, and you torch your own deal.
You're 100%.
But that's the position they're in right now, right? Like this. What
a terrible position.
But this is the thing about the swinging big that we've talked about before, right? Yeah. Like if you swing big, you could, again, it's an MLS Cup. Maybe you're competing for a continental championship. It doesn't work. The risk around it is so big, and it has the house of cards has come apart. Right, and I think it's kind of shown in the way that the rest of the roster is built out. But let's talk a little bit about potential incomings. I know this rumor is floating out there now. This has been within the last couple of hours. A young player coming in, Cassius Maluda. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly.
Best striker ever that plays winger. Best striker ever.
Out of the South African League, Mamelodi Sundowns. They are the South African champions. There is a rumor that it's a strong rumor out of South Africa now. It's being reported that TFC and the club are working on a potential transfer in. He would be technically a U22 initiative player. Again, I'm not going to pretend that I've watched a lot of the South African Premiership. I don't know a lot about him, other than the fact that he's a rising talent in South Africa. Mike, again, I don't know if you've heard anything in this regard, but this seems to be something that sort of come down in the last couple of hours.
Yeah, so one of the things I spoke about last week, if you listen back or if you guys have listened to it, was that Toronto FC are going to be targeting more under-22 initiative signings. So this is likely the name that's the most far advanced, but what I will add is there are definitely some other names out there that Toronto FC are circling that are around a similar type of profile. So it seems clear that TFC want a under-22 initiative winger. I don't think we can really call him a striker. I think we'll call him more of a winger. And I think it's the type of player. Can you say
that louder for the people at the back, please?
I mean, yeah, maybe he played some striker, so maybe there's a way that you could fit him into like a 4-4-2 as a striker. But I think it's more so winger. But I think the type of profile that TFC are after, listen, we've talked about it. This team's really slow.
Yeah.
So they really want to inject some more pace into the squad and people who, they have a lot of guys who can play in between lines right now. They need guys who can run through lines. And you're watching the game on Saturday, and I'm thinking to myself, who's really going to make who's really going to make runs in behind? Who's really going to be the guy who's, when Jonathan Osorio picks the ball in the number 10 position, looks at what's in front of him, what's going to be the difference maker there? Who is he going to find with the through ball? There weren't too many options, right? I think DeAndre Kerr had some moments in the first half, but obviously his limits have been more limited. So that's the type of player I think they want to go after, a guy who can be direct, a guy who can, like I said, just pace and just covers a lot of ground, that can really get on the shoulders of defenders and challenge them and maybe spread the line a little bit, create more movement, create more space. And I think he primarily plays on the right side. Another player I've heard also TFC targeting plays on the right side. So I think that also ties into what we were saying earlier about Federico Bernardeschi. And one thing I will add too, the other player that I heard is from a really obscure market as well. So I think that's a really interesting tidbit too, where TFC are expanding maybe some of the regions that they've been targeting players and scouting players, and are going for more guys who may not be as high profile maybe as before.
Yeah, and this is sort of the stuff I've been screaming out for, right? I think a lot of people have been screaming out for that. They need to expand sort of the way that they look at developing and signing players. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm all for spinning this positively, but can we at least allow for the fact that these are probably the only players that will come to TFC at this point, as the chat is carefully saying, and two, did I start with whatever, 1 and 2, or A and B, whichever one I did? We don't have the money for the European guys. We have the money for the U22 guys, realistically. So I just think it's important for me to interject there, because I love blowing smoke up asses, but like to qualify this as like a coup of the scouting department and to ignore the fact that like maybe this is all we can do, I think is a little unfair.
I don't know if necessarily anybody's saying that this is a coup or anything like that. I think it's more the idea that, the club needs to, or acknowledgement that the club does need to look in other markets and other ways to develop the squad. And look, they probably could. Okay, fine, the cap is what it is, but I think if they wanted to go out, they probably could maybe convince the board to maybe extend a little bit more money if they wanted to go down that route in terms of a quote unquote DP number 9. Now, of course, they can't do that at the moment, but this is the way you're going to have to start to build an actual core of players before you start, going out. You build the cart first, and then get the horse. And
we're also ignoring that if we get rid of even one of our fancy schmancy DPs, we've got a lot more money on the books all of a sudden. So.
But honestly, I think it's really disappointing the team hasn't been able to use their U22 slots as well. That's such a useful mechanism in this league. And, if we want to transition quickly to Franco Ibarra and his debut with the club, like that's a U22 initiative signing. I think Atlanta paid maybe $3 million, maybe a little bit less, for his transfer fee to come over. And they pay him about $600,000 in salary. Obviously, his cap hit's only $200K because he's a U22 initiative signing. Look at the quality of player you can get with that investment. It's not that significant, and Franco Ibarra is a baller. So the fact that TFC, they're using one of their U22 initiative slots on Iowa Canola, who obviously has fallen incredibly short of expectations. But if they were able to surround the Insignes, the Bernardeschis, the Crescidos when he was here with 3 quality U22 signings, and you add in the Sean Johnson, the Matt Head, like you're talking about a squad, which again, you look at the way TFC built their squad, I think that part is just incredibly disappointing that they didn't maximize all of the resources that were available to them. And part of that reasoning, of course, is also the funds that were available to them from the board. So just a combination of everything, just no foresight really in terms of how they should have built out this roster. Just disappointing.
Yeah, and I think this goes to what a lot of people have been saying for the last couple of weeks, like this idea that, the way of thinking at Toronto FC in terms of how to build a team has been more around sort of marketing than actual football. Not to say again that the players are not good football. It's just it doesn't keep in line with sort of how MLS is trending and how to build a winner in this league or build a contender in this league.
You said it, Mike.
And look, in TFC, the reason TFC won MLS Cup in the first place was because they bucked the trend, right? They had bucked the trend of going for South American players, instead went European and went bigger named and went veteran in 2016, 2017 to win MLS Cup. But you just can't do that anymore in that way. And you know, I think TFC are maybe slowly starting to realize that. We'll see, obviously, as the window continues to develop and as sort of next year comes into focus. But you know, we'll see how this rumor transpires. But I mean, look, from everything I'm sort of reading, again, there's more to read and to learn about Cassius Malula, but it sounds like he's kind of the profile of player that you might be looking for under those kind of initiative signings. Really quickly, obviously want to touch on the Mark-Anthony Kaye trade, trading him out to New England for Latif Blessing. I mean, wanted to get both your reactions to that. I got the thoughts on sort of the year of Mark-Anthony Kaye, but wanted for just first of all get both your reactions to the trade and sort of what happened here.
I think I'm in trouble if I speak, so I'll just I'll cede this one.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I wasn't really surprised. TFC needed a shakeup, and the one player really that, you know, was expendable and could actually get you something in return is, you know, we talked about it. It's Mark-Anthony Kaye, right? They needed to, especially with Franco Ibarra coming in, they had an opportunity just to get a different look out of their midfield, and obviously shipping him out for Latif Blessing was, again, just a different type of player. I don't think this necessarily has much to do with Mark-Anthony Kaye's work ethic, his professionalism, his character, or any of those things. I think it more so this is a football trade, which also frees up a tiny bit of salary for TFC. They're not as tied in long term to Latif Blessing's contract. I believe Latif Blessing's a little bit younger as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, different profile, a lot more mobile, a lot smaller. Just give TFC something different. So for me, this was more of a shake-up kind of move, and one that they had the ability to make, so they made it.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did Mac request a trade, or was this a surprise to him?
Yeah, no, I don't think he requested a trade. No.
Okay.
Yeah. And look, I it's a shame it didn't work. It's a shame that, you know, he came back and so much expectation was put on him. John Molinaro wrote about this in TFC Republic, but
really, really well.
Yeah, that there was so much expectation brought on with him being a national team player, being a local guy, you know, being in the academy before we let him go, and he went off and became a professional and really sort of found his footing at LAFC, and then really couldn't find that form again. We obviously in stops in Colorado, and then, you know, coming to Toronto FC via that trade. So like it's a little disappointing that it just hasn't quite worked out. And look, a lot of people took a lot of shots at him, you know, and look, we did too, right? Like in terms of his performance, right? It wasn't at times
in terms of
enough.
His performance.
Yes, in terms of his performance. And sometimes it wasn't good enough. You know, obviously the other counterpoint to that is that from a tackles perspective, he leads the league still. So, and you could take that stat however you like. Rather
join me in the dark side, my friend. I've eaten
it's one way or the other.
Such S for that stat. Like I have no idea.
I know, right? Like, and I get it. Some people rate it. Some people don't care about it at all. I do think that. I do think from a human perspective that has been lost sometimes a little bit, especially with him. And you know, this is essentially the second time he will have been rejected is kind of a harsh word, but by his hometown club. And that's
not a harsh word. He's not playing here anymore.
And he's been moving around a lot, right? Like he's been moving around a lot in the last couple of years. And I think that we as fans sometimes have to look, we can criticize performances. I'm not saying we can't do that, or you as a fan listening or watching cannot criticize a performance. I do think sometimes, especially with Mark-Anthony Kaye, it did cross a line at times.
We should be ashamed of ourselves as a fan base. I'm sorry. We should be ashamed of ourselves.
Sure. I mean, like, I think it did cross a line. And I'm not even talking about the incident. That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about other things as well. But I think that we just have to remember that sometimes. That these guys are humans, and they feel the emotion. And look, Mark-Anthony Kaye didn't come to Toronto to underperform and lose games and not live
make
up
out
to
with Bob Bradley.
Yeah, right. Like, obviously came in with the hope that he could, rebuild TFC to what it was and win a championship in his hometown.
Oh my God.
And things like that.
You don't have to watch Nicotom Developers Limited. You really don't have to watch if you don't like it that much.
But go ahead, Mike. Sorry, you were about to jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, I think everyone who has grown up here in Toronto, playing in Toronto, I think everyone was rooting for Mark-Anthony Kaye as a local guy, kind of trying to come through the squad. So, when it doesn't work out, I was surprised that it took kind of the turn that it did. When I'll use the whipping boy here. Let's face it. That being said, he didn't live up to it on the playing side either. I think there was massive expectations that were set on his shoulders, fairly or unfairly, probably a bit unfairly because of, the success that he had playing in LAFC. You also have to remember that LAFC system probably fit him a lot better, and that team probably fit him a lot better than this team did. He was brought in and expected to be an 8 that can, pick up a couple goal contributions, that can
play
track back, that can fill the gaps. Yes, press, exactly. Do some really good pressing work. And there was a lot that was, like I said, just put on his shoulders. The one thing I think that was particularly disappointing, he wasn't as steady in the midfield as he needed on the ball.
True.
And I think there were some really glaring mistakes that, quite frankly, anybody watching soccer can, you see and you acknowledge and you realize that, that those kind of plays like stand out like a sore thumb. So I think that's kind of what his kryptonite was, whereas you miss some of the other parts of his game that were really good. Like, as you guys point out, the tackles and the gritty work and the defensive work that he did. So, this guy, the one thing I will say about Mark-Anthony Kaye, he was almost always available. He was versatile. He was willing to drop in, play that 6 role, played the 6 role well, played center back even at times, played different midfield positions. He's I honestly think he's going to do well in New England. I really do. I think playing on turf, playing in like more flats, or like, I think that might benefit him a little bit. And obviously you have Carlos Heel there as well, which, if your job, Mark-Anthony Kaye was actually a pretty good progressive passer. So if your job is just to find Carlos Heel over and over, I think you're going to find some success. So I think he's going to a team right now that's second place in the Eastern Conference. I think he'll do well. So, happy for him. I personally, for me, jury's out right now on Latif Blessing.
Agree.
I didn't quite love what I saw so far out of him, but we'll see exactly how it plays out.
He lost his job in New England. He was brought in to be a starter and lost his job there. So in a lot of ways, this was a trade for distressed assets. One
thing if I can add quickly, Latif Blessing was a player that TFC targeted actually in the offseason. So I can confirm that TFC wanted Latif Blessing. So maybe it's just them revisiting kind of an asset they wanted before. And obviously new guy at the helm now, so maybe there's something else Jason Hernandez sees in Latif Blessing than maybe Bob Bradley did, or he sees the same thing. But this is a player the club's had interest in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously had ties to Bob Bradley at LAFC as well. Funny enough, they played.
If we could only have them together,
Well, Kaye and Blessing played together in LA. So
and it was their best time in MLS.
And their careers are playing together. All right, let's quickly close out the Michael Singh notebook. Any other potential things you're hearing out there, Mike? Obviously, you talked a little bit about other U22s, but I guess we'll let that cook for a bit before.
The one thing I'll say,
people are asking like crazy.
Oh, I think people keep asking about also Richie Larea. I get the sense that ship has sailed. in terms of Richie Larea. I do not believe he's actually with Nottingham Forest in preseason as well. So I think for Richie Larea, he's trying to now facilitate a move elsewhere. I talked about it extensively on this podcast 2 episodes ago in terms of laying out exactly what the situation was with Richie Larea. So I won't get into, too much further detail, but anybody who's listened to it kind of understands the situation Toronto FC were in. They had interest in Richie, but from a price tag standpoint, I don't think it made sense for them to actually go out and pursue it. So unless something changes, maybe Richie doesn't get what he's looking for elsewhere, maybe there's a reunion there. But my understanding is the ship is sailed for now.
Yeah. I think a lot of people now understand that. Long story short, if he was coming back, he'd have to be a DP, and you just don't have any DP spots for him. End of the day. All right, quickly into this weekend's game. I have to talk about it.
Hold on, manager. They're screaming in the chat. Do we know anything about the gaffer search?
What I can share is I know there were some local candidates that were also interviewed. I guess let's call them local candidates that were interviewed for the position. Again, as I talked about last week, I think TFC aren't going to go big on their next manager. So, Bob Bradley said Terry Dunfield has these 4 games. Bill Manning said Terry Dunfield has these 4 games. And he said if they find the right manager after that, including could potentially have been Terry Dunfield, then they'll make their appointment before the League's Cup. That is an if, right? It wasn't a hard timeline saying this is what we're going to do. So we'll see exactly how these next couple of days plays out. But I'll save the rest for the burning question.
Yeah, because we are going to address it in the burning question. But speaking of Terry Dunfield and performances in 4 games, they lose again on the weekend to Chicago 1-0, another 90th minute collapse. But let's be real here. They were never in that game. They played well in tiny stretches here and there. But the same, we feel like a broken record, right? It's goals. There never felt a moment in which TFC were really ever going to threaten Chicago with scoring a goal. And you could feel that in the stadium. You could feel that from the away supporters. You can actually feel that from Chicago FC, Chicago Fire fans. They just were okay. We're just waiting until you collapse to give us a goal. Right. And that was really the vibe of the game. Like just being in the stands, obviously from away support perspective, the idea is to go and support your team as loud as you can. And, the smaller group of us were very loud, but at the same time, you just, again, that sort of inevitable feeling of this is not going to happen creeps in. Right. As you watch this team, and as you said, Michael, Jonathan Osorio getting the ball in pockets of space and having no one to pass to or no one forward above him to pass to. Ibarra, like you said, looked really good. I thought Shaquille was also relatively solid. But in the end of the day, Ayo hits a shot that almost goes out for a throw in. It never looked like anybody was really ever going to step up and take a chance. And that's just where we're at right now as a club. Mm-hmm.
I guess let me illustrate it for you, right? So TFC got better when in the second half when they switched to the 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
Right. They played Jonathan Osorio as that number 10. A lot of times, even the commentator said Jonathan Osorio is like the quarterback of this team because TFC were playing through Jonathan Osorio because he was in that prominent spot where you can kind of create from there. But Jonathan Osorio picks up the ball in the middle of the park, right? Edge of the box, attacking third. To his left, you have Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, which, as you mentioned, Mike, I thought Jaquil actually had a pretty decent game, but Jaquil, he's not at the point of his career where he's beating guys 1v1. So he is literally standing like almost at the touchline waiting for the ball. Okay, there are times where, he has some decent movement, but a lot of his movement was actually the same as, Ayo Akinola's that was right in front of him.
Yeah.
He's still never any really threatening movement. Beside Jaquil is Ayo Akinola, who tended to drop deeper and show for the ball and try and link up. let's call a spade a spade. Ayo Akinola at this point right now, nowhere close to good enough to be able to drop deep and link up with his teammates. He's not at a point where he can combine well. And then beside him, you have CJ Sapong. Quite frankly, I don't really know what CJ Sapong was doing out there in the final third.
Well, he would do a lot of the same things that Ayo would do. That's the problem, right? Like
a lot of the same
similar
things.
Of this player.
But also, I don't know. I just felt like he was caught in no man's land a lot of time and wasn't really making a huge difference. I thought TFC were actually their best off the counter and the rush. I thought that's when they were the most dangerous, but still don't have that final threat. So then to the right of them, you have Latif Blessing, who is, I'm not a tall person, so I can say like he's really short, and you're trying to spray long balls to Latif Blessing.
Yeah.
And that's getting picked off easily, or is forcing him to a corner, is forcing him to kind of just reset. So like you're looking at that as Jonathan Osorio and being like, okay, if you're wondering why Ozo's moving the ball so slowly at times, it's because what's his option? Like what's the best way to kind of move forward and make a play out that attacking third? I spoke about this already. TFC need way more movement. They need so much better movement when it comes to people who are hungry to get into the box, when it comes to people who are hungry to get in behind, people that are willing to make the diagonal runs more often. They don't have enough of those types of players. And I think that's something, like I said, the team's going to try and address.
Yeah, and I think that was juxtaposed to sort of Chicago, right? Who had players that were willing to run in behind, that had players that would do something dynamic to be able to break through lines. There were times where Xherdan Shaqiri, received the ball at the top of the 18 and was unmarked. And completely that's Xherdan Shaqiri. Like like at the end of the day, I get it. Maybe he's not at the top form in MLS, but like those are dangerous positions, and he would be able to get in behind at times. And that was, you're looking at a team in Chicago who, in many ways, were at the beginning of the season in a similar predicament as Toronto FC, and have found a way to slowly get better. Not leaps and bounds yet, but I think they've won 5 out of their last 6, and are playing quite well. And look, at the end of the game, that sort of the dagger goal really just comes from, like you said, a transition opportunity, where TFC actually had probably the one real good opportunity in the game, come off that counter, and it's just simply no one marks Kasper Shabilko in the box. It's a simple header.
He made a good run. He made a really good run. He kind of faked Matt Hedges there, where he looked like he was going to drive near post and then just pulled up. And he got a half a yard, and credit to him, the ball was right accurate, and he made him pay.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't really fault the defending too much, but it was preventable for sure.
Yeah, I would lean more on the side of preventable. That said, it just does, again, like I said, it does speak to the fact that there is just a lack of dynamicism in the Toronto FC lineup right now. And this is something we've talked about on this podcast numerous times, right? The ability of when they do have possession, how slow the ball moves, how predictable it is where they're going to pass the ball, and how easy it is for defenses to essentially set up and dare them to break them down, which they just simply cannot at this time.
Brandon Cervania right back too.
Yeah. That was interesting.
That was because he had Jaquil Marcheretti on the pitch too, and he still elected to go Brandon Cervania right back. I thought he was okay too. The goal did come down that side.
Yeah,
but I thought he made some solid plays. He had a good tackle up the line, smart on the ball, obviously as a central midfielder. It was interesting, like something completely different we haven't really seen yet out of Terry Dunfield. Just something kind of out of the blue.
So let me ask the question here now. This is like 3-4 games now with Terry as the interim. All losses and no goals.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's probably a very easy answer to this, and maybe it is the very easy answer, but how would you sort of rate? I know we asked this in the burning question last week, I believe, or the week before, but how would you rate Terry's job right now in terms of maybe just the results? Because obviously the results are what they are, and I think those were kind of predictable, but just in terms of how he's setting up the team, the selections that he's making, some of the choices he's making in substitutions, how would you sort of rate Terry at this point? Because, that point where the judgment will be made whether or not he is going to continue to be the interim through the rest of the season, or they will go out and pull the trigger on a manager, is coming up fairly soon. So
why don't we do our burning question for that?
Sure.
And then we can get into that.
Fair enough. So we'll go into the burn. We do have the 2 burning questions this week. So we will go into that, and then we'll sort of address Terry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it.
The burning question presented by Nextdoor. Nextdoor is the official community app of Toronto FC. It is also where you can connect with the people and local businesses in your neighborhood. We'll be posting the burning question each week, the day before, in the Toronto FC fan group. So join by either downloading the app or going to nextdoor.ca. So double burning question. This week, we asked 2 questions. So 1, will TFC win another game? And that was a little facetious, but fair enough. And then the second,
I did a poll too.
Yeah. And second, who do you think will become Toronto FC's new manager? So I'll read out a few answers here, and obviously let's get into it, Jen. So George on the Toronto FC fan group on Nextdoor says yes, in terms of another win. Fresh blood like Ibarra had a positive impact. And look, he did play really well, right? Like let's we kind of slammed him for his initial comments. But look, he did come out during the week and explain sort of why he was feeling the way he felt. And I think that's a reasonable response. And then I think he also responded in terms of his play, right? And Mike, you sort of touched on that as well. And then he actually thinks Terry Dunfield will be the new manager, at least for the rest of the season. And Vibhas, also on the Toronto FC fan group, just says, this will probably go down as one of our worst seasons ever, but absolutely, I think we can win another 3 or 4 games. We are playing a little bit better, and our confidence is improving as well. I may not agree with him on necessarily that we're playing better, but fair enough. From Twitter, we have Lee coming in saying, honestly, I don't see it happening in terms of another win. There's just no danger in this team right now. The DPs have gone mentally. It puts the team, he says them, but the team behind every other MLS squad. A mega outlier of a coin flip for Toronto FC to outscore an MLS opponent, and then no idea. Obviously, he's hoping for a new president first before you select a new manager. And actually, I do have a point around that. And then lastly, Kimbo Rice. I just picked this up because that's a great name. Yes, players will come back from injury, and they'll figure it out to win 3 or 4 games. People really think there's 3 or 4 more wins in this team. I'm not really sure about that. And then yes, in terms of new manager, hopefully MLC will understand that it's evolving and they need a tactician at the helm. The Christmas wish would be a Thomas Tuchel. And then in reality, it'll probably end up being Caleb Porter. Which is possible. But gents, let's talk about the manager position here for a second, because
first, can I do my poll results? Because
go ahead. Yeah.
I put up a poll, and it was, does TFC win another game this season? Yes, no, and no, but with free hot dogs. And yes, 1, but if you add the no's together, gents, no's 1. 59.3%.
Well, if you put free hot dogs in
no.
there, people are going to pick free hot dogs.
Do not question my methods. I got the answer that I wanted.
Yeah.
So yes, no more wins.
Yeah, fair enough. But manager, Terry's been in now. No goals, like we said, no wins. Just your thoughts again on sort of that tactical acumen, like in terms of what he's been doing in terms of the lineups and in substitution and player selections for games. How are you feeling about that so far?
I like the flexibility that he's shown. We've seen a lot of different formations out of TFC. Like I mentioned, they started in a bit of a flat 4-4-2. The first half of the game, which is something we quite frankly didn't really see under Bob Bradley really at all. And then, I think he realized that they needed an extra body in the midfield. And that's when you bring in, I believe it was Alonso Coelho who came in, and that's when they shifted to more of the 4-2-3-1. And, TFC improved from that point on. So that's just one small example in terms of, some of the positives that he's instilled on this team. I think he's running into a lot of the same issues that Bob Bradley ran into. Is just the fact that this team can't score goals. And then I don't think they have players on this roster right now, especially, and it has to be said and it has to be emphasized, especially when you don't have your DPs. Those are the guys that TFC leaned on when they built this roster to be like, if they're not difference makers for this team is not going to be good. It's not going to succeed. So when you strip those guys away from the roster, Terry's job becomes that much harder in terms of creating in the final third and making a difference there in that sense. So the fact that TFC haven't scored any goals throughout his tenure, it's obviously a really disappointing stat, but at the same time, when you dig deeper, it's not that surprising. Its team's just not dangerous at all in the final third without its DPs. So I can't really, it's tough to give him a fair grade for all of this because the amount of players that he's had available to him, right? He's missed a lot of guys to the Gold Cup. And then when they do come back, his DPs are gone. It's really tough to give him a fair grade throughout this whole process. We can only go based off, what we see in games, but I do hear a lot of positives about the way that he's been approaching training, a way that he is obviously as a person. We talked about Terry Dunfield at length about how great of a motivator and how great of a person that he is. And he's a guy that you're, as a player, you probably want to pay for. I've heard some unique training methods out of him, let's call it, or maybe his training methods are obviously going to be completely different to Bob Bradley's, for example, or maybe even some other coaches in general, but he approaches that completely differently. Again, like I said, I think this is too small of a sample size for us to actually fairly give him a pass or a fail. But if you're going just based off results, obviously it's a fail, right? It's
I don't think I'm asking for a grade here. I just want to get the general vibe because, like you said, 4 games is just not enough.
Yeah, so that's what I'll say.
His sartorial game is amazing. I mean, the cardigan's fantastic. So you gotta counter that.
How much was that, Terry?
Yeah. We all need Terry hoodies. Bringing Pinball Clemens in, inspired. And I'll tell you the other thing that I like. He coached some of these kids that we're getting to see that he's giving minutes to. And at the very least, I appreciate that he's doing that, because he doesn't have a full deck to play with. He's got, there's problems everywhere. At the very least, he's giving these kids that he's developed a personal relationship through the academy some first team minutes.
Including in training too. I'll say that there's been a lot more academy kids that have been integrated to the first team during training as well.
That's got to be a success, guys. You have to look at that as some measure of a success.
It's a positive, sure.
It's a positive, yeah. Maybe success is too strong a word.
I wouldn't necessarily success. Yeah, positive, sure. I'll
positive.
Take that. Yeah. Look, to me, Terry was in a no win.
We talked about it.
Yeah, he's in a no-win situation here, right? To me, it doesn't make sense to bring another manager in now. Like, I just don't see the logic. And I mean, other than, okay, maybe he gets a little bit, he or she could, but could be a longer runway into just getting to know the club, the players that that they might be working with next season, things like that. Like, I'm not thinking playoffs. I'm not thinking somebody coming in and making a run for the playoff. I don't see it happening. So the question just becomes, do you wait to find the right person, or do you just hire somebody for the sake of hiring somebody? And I think, as somebody who's been around this club a long time, doing that has never boded well for TFC. It has never boded well to just go hire somebody in the middle. It just doesn't. It never works out well. The one time it did, of course, it was Greg Vanny, but that person was already in your system, right? At the time. So
with Dunny then, yeah.
Look, I'm not saying Dunny's going to be the long-term answer. I'll almost be certain that he won't be the long-term answer, but I don't really see where personally, I just don't see where you benefit in bringing in a manager now for these final 11 games.
But I think only the right manager is available, then you go out and get him now, right? Because you don't want to risk. Maybe if you think you have the person here who at this point of time is available, you might not want to risk waiting until the end of the season in order to bring them in.
Sure, but here's the question: what profile is the right manager at this point? Because I honestly I don't know, because is it somebody who is a stronger at player development? Are you looking for somebody that is going to take on a younger core of players and try to develop them? Are you looking for, you mentioned, Mike, that they're probably not going for a bigger manager, but maybe should they be looking for a bigger manager? Because the way you're talking, Caleb Porter is out of the question. Like, he would not be that guy. So, what is the profile of a manager that Toronto FC should be looking for? Right. And again, this goes back, and I'm being it's an answer, but it is a little, rhetorical, just simply because we just don't know what we don't know what this club wants to be right now. So if you don't even know what you want to be from a upper management level, or at least that hasn't been communicated to supporters, how the hell are you going to know what your manager is, or what type of profile your manager should be?
100%. 100%. You don't even know who's going to be on your team. I mean, let's be honest here, right? Like, at the end of this transfer window, we could be down to one DP, and it's Jonathan Osorio. It makes no sense. Like, if you're looking for a manager that's going to be the DP whisperer, and you may not have your DPs, that's pretty foolish. I don't see any impetus to go mental looking for a manager right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add on that front. I think it's quite clear that the club has lost its identity in so many different ways, down to the fact that we don't really know what type of football they want their team to be playing. And
but apparently that doesn't matter. They only care about winning.
That's maybe the point, right? So, I don't really have much to add on that point.
Yeah, and I get it, because it just, until you figure that out, really figure that out, I just don't see how you go and get a manager right now, like a full-time manager, because all you're doing is setting up that manager to fail.
Yep.
Again, right? Like you don't, and who knows? Again, where does Bill Manning go from here? Should he be the person even making this selection? There's a lot of capital lost in the fan base in terms of, should he be the person making this choice?
Yep.
Right. I don't know. Personally, no, he shouldn't be. But, in the end of the day, that may be moot, and the board may just be keeping him, and he has to make another decision.
The Argos are 4-0.
So he can be the president of the Argos. But there's nothing wrong with that. You can split the roles. It doesn't have to do both.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted to do both to begin with.
No, I don't. I know he didn't want to do both to begin with. Anyway, we'll leave it at that for this week's show. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toronto Till I Die. We'll be back next week, setting up TFC's group stage games in a Leagues Cup against NYCFC and Atlas at home on the 30th. New ask for the viewers and listeners out there. We're trying to grow the membership and conversations within the Toronto FC fan group on Nextdoor. So if you already have the app, search Toronto FC fan group and join. We're posting, obviously, the burning question there, but we'll also be posting more content, clips from the show there as well. And of course, our contests as well. And those who haven't, go ahead, download the app on Google Play, or go to nextdoor.ca, download and join the group. For Michael Singh and for Jeffrey P. Nesker, I'm Mike Newell. See you all next week. Cheers, everybody.
And see.
Freeze.
And wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.